I am Onyenoha. Popola, you can call me Lanwe. I'm a pharmacist from Nigeria. Currently,
Okay.
I'm in the UK for my master's, and
Okay.
I'm a member of the publications committee, and I'll be leading this interview. So, Dr. Chukwumerije, we are glad to have you, and we are confident that your vast years of experience will be of great contribution to FIP ECPG. Thank you everyone for coming around. Today we'll be interviewing Dr. Onyenoha Chukwumerije, which is an industrial pharmacist expert from Nigeria, and we'll be speaking with him on some questions on industrial pharmacy. I am Lanwe from the Publications Committee, and Doctor, we are glad to have you here.
Sure. Thank you. Glad to be here.
First question is about some of the emerging roles in industrial pharmacy and how young pharmacists can maximize them. Given your many decades of experience as an industrial pharmacist, what are some of the emerging trends and how do you feel young pharmacists all over the world can access them?
Right. This is a great question. Pharmacy is a very interesting field, and there are so many areas. When you are in the developing world, you might be limited. However, in the world of pharmacy, there are so many areas. When I was starting my career, it was mostly small molecules that were being developed. Then we went into large molecules, proteins, and so forth. Right now, you'll be hearing about cell therapy and stem cells. I just went to a company that their function, this company is based in Houston, the medical center at Houston, and they have cell banks that industries work with them, and they supply them with these stem cells to develop interesting drugs for cancer and other difficult diseases. So this is a very interesting area that young pharmacists should be looking into. And as you know, AI is everywhere now, and the AI is used in the development of drugs and even in clinical trials and so forth. So getting ahead and understanding how to use this new tool is very important. Uh, Another area that has been, it's not really new, is automation. Because in the pharmaceutical industry, we are concerned about compliance, and that's my area. Because if you make all these drugs, our the pharmaceutical industry is highly regulated by drug agencies. Each country has their own drug agency. In Nigeria, it's NAFDAC. In the US, it's FDA. In the UK, it's MHRA and so forth. So different countries have theirs. Japan is TGA. You have to follow certain guidelines to produce drugs because drugs cure us, but they are also poisons. So if you don't produce them properly, they can be contaminated and harm the patient, or you can produce overdose and so forth. Or if not overdose, sorry, I got to. You can produce drugs that have low potency and so forth. So automation helps in eliminating human interference, human error that can lead to some of these issues. So those are some of the areas that one has to look into. In developing countries like in Africa, drug development is not it's not common. Most factories produce generics of other drugs. So, but it's an emerging area in developing countries to for young pharmacists that are coming up um, to really look into that area. Is very exciting. I have one of my ex-students who works in that area now, especially in clinical trials, which is very exciting. Because when most students graduate, especially from Nigerian universities and others in Africa, uh, uh, because of lack of other areas to work, they work mostly in community pharmacies, in hospitals, and some in industrial pharmacy. So there are so many areas in pharmacy where one can work. And for those coming from developing countries, uh, when you get into the pharmaceutical industry, there are so many areas also. Packaging science, there are those that focus their career on the development of packaging. In school, you were taught about packaging science and technology. Uh, but in industry, there are those that are just focused on doing that. There are some that are focused on materials management and so forth. Others are focused on quality control and so forth. So there are so many areas one can hone their skills in industrial pharmacy. But when we discuss the other questions, I can now go into that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. And I think it's quite important also that we, as young pharmacists, get to understand how, to move around with these trends like the use of artificial intelligence, automation, compliance, and more importantly, even drug development. It
Right.
really is something that should be prioritized. I do agree with that, sir. Okay, so the next question is still similar to the first one, but how can early career pharmacists get involved in some of these trends? Now, you've mentioned quite a number of trends already.
The If it's in the developed world, I don't know where I'm covering. It's easier because you have all these opportunities in the UK, in the United States, Canada, Australia, and so forth. You have all these, and even in schools now, they are introducing pharmacy schools. They are introducing some of these things that I mentioned to you. It's more challenging in uh, the developing countries. The developing countries are limited in resources and in attracting expertise in some of these areas because you need expertise in this industrial pharmacy. So what I encourage the early career folks like you is to really, uh, if there's an opportunity, especially if you are in the UK and some of these places, to volunteer. Let me use myself for example. When I graduated from graduate school, I had to do a postdoc. It wasn't paying a lot, but I had to work for a company that did basic research just to learn the skills and different things that I didn't have the opportunity in the school to do. So I had to do that. I had to get that training. And they sponsored me. I learned a lot. I spent some time there before going to industry. So similarly, if there's an opportunity around where the students are to learn, even volunteer, to help the company and learn these skills, that's one area to get into. And also to seek mentorship, to seek mentorship. You have to do your own research. Luckily, you guys have a lot of opportunities than we had. You have your Google, you have your search engines to find out, to locate where you can go. During our time, we didn't have all that. So if you find out where they have some of these things going on, you can volunteer. You can also, just like you're doing, which I'm very impressed, participate in organizations such as FIP and join other pharmaceutical organizations. In the United States, they have um, AAPS, which is American Association of Pharmaceutical Scientists. They have similar thing in the UK and other countries, where um, you participate in different teams. Like all this AI, they have a section for that. They have a section for cell therapy. They have a section for injectables. They have a section for validations, process validation, cleaning validation, sterile manufacturing, and so forth. Whichever one interests you, you participate in these things and volunteer for leadership. What I'm telling you is what I did. You volunteer for leadership. Let me tell you what I did. When I was working for a company called Hoffman LaRoche, I joined the American Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Association, the dissolution group. I went to that meeting. They were looking to change leadership. They said those who want to be chairman also raised I raised my hand. I became the chairman. It helped me a lot in terms of understanding the dissolution testing, which, as you know, is needed in tablet manufacturing. You know, it helped me a lot. It even helped me to advance my career because I have it on my CV. And when they see it, oh, he's the chairman of this for the entire America. So I didn't do it just for that. I did it to learn, but also to advance my career. So joining and participating and leading, don't just be a follower, but first of all, you got to join. Then you seek an opportunity to really lead because when you lead, you learn how to strategize and solve problems and all that. So it's very critical. So in these emerging areas, joining and also networking, you meet people from different industries, different schools, just like here you are meeting my former students, Emily, and you have others that you are meeting with all over the world. You interact, exchange the ideas, and this is how you grow in your career.
Wow, very, very important insights right there. I think one very important thing is the participation. Young pharmacists really need to participate as much as they can and not just be mere followers, but getting right involved in the FIP, the IPSF, building their
Right.
networks. And another important thing I took note is that sometimes you need to just explore opportunities. They may
Right.
not be the most financially viable opportunities, just as you did in your postdoc, but they would really go a long way in bolstering your experiences and could really help in the long term in your career. So those
Yes.
are my take home points, and I'm going to do
Uh,
well to work on them.
yeah,
Thank you very much.
and I'm going to emphasize that maybe when we discuss the other topics, I'm going to emphasize not just looking at short-term gains and focus on the long term.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So we have a third question, and it's on what initiatives could like bridge the gap between pharmacy education and industrial pharmacy career.
Yeah, first of all, you have to, um, I trust that the schools will hire experts that understand industrial pharmacy. You know, when you are trained as a pharmacist, there are so many areas, as you know. There's pharmacology, there's clinical pharmacy, microbiology, even pharmaceutics and pharmaceutical technology. But it's very important that you the universities attract lecturers or instructors that have experience working in the factory so that they can motivate the students. Like when I taught at Uniport and Unizik, I came from industry. So wherever I'm teaching them is from my experience. And when I took them to uh, industrial visits in Lagos and Ogun State, it's wow. So everything that you taught us, we're seeing it, you know. So it's very important uh, that to bridge that gap, first that you have people that really have the experience and the expertise to make it interesting for students to learn. So uh, that's one gap that needs to be filled. And um, I think having industrial visits by students, I used to lead it. Having industrial the students, because theory is different than when you see it, and you know that pharmaceutical manufacturing is complicated. You teach students about heat transfer and so forth. It's very theoretical stuff. But when they go to the factory and see um, all the equipment, the drying mechanism, and so forth, that hits it home. Because whenever I took my students, they say, wow, that hits it home. So industrial visits are very important. And uh, my experience is that the factories allow students to come in. It's difficult for them, it's challenging, but they let them come in. And if mentorship from industry, like you see, when I see attract instructors from industry, and I don't think it's very well done in developed countries, developing countries. Uh, my professor, when I went to school at St. John's University in New York, was an industry guy. He was full time in industry. He came part time to teach us, you know. So I appreciated that a lot, you know. So we can attract, especially those schools that are close to factories like in the West, in Lagos, Ogun State, and so forth. They can attract lecturers from factory to come and teach those students part time. It's not their full time job. I don't know whether our universities are structured that way, but they have to think like that to bridge that gap. And then, uh, and then internships or yeah, internships. Internship is after, but uh, industrial training. There's an industrial training that goes on in some places. If those can be done, if I was structuring the industrial training, if I was running it, it's really, if it's like a 1 year program, maybe 3 months or so in a factory, must do it. You do hospital, you do community pharmacy, you spread it out. The way it's run in some places now, you just go one place and do that. That doesn't really round up the person. So that's really what I think. And in Nigeria, there are some companies that when they admit you for internship, like EMSO and other companies such as that. They rotate you among different areas. Though within their factory, they rotate you. They rotate you to regulatory affairs and different sections of pharmacy.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, and for providing context in both developing and developed countries. FIP ECPG has members from all over the world, and I think that your contribution will be very important to anyone that is listening to us from all over the world. I really do appreciate industrial visits, and from my own personal experience, I think that was one of the highlights of my fourth year in pharmacy school, that we
Right,
had to, visit a pharmaceutical industry. And
right.
I also agree to internships. I think internships really go a long way in spurring young pharmacists' interest in industrial pharmacy. So thank you very much, sir. We do hope that schools of pharmacy all over the world do their best to bring in the best in the industrial pharmacy space. I think that is also really important. That's also
Yes.
important. Okay, thank you very much. And uh, the fourth question is, so what do you think can motivate young pharmacists' interest in industrial pharmacy? Now, I think you've mentioned some of the points already, but is there any other thing from your many years of experience that you have seen that could motivate young pharmacists to go into this aspect of pharmacy practice?
I think I have covered it. What happens is that if a young pharmacist or a pharmacy student is not um, uh, doesn't have the opportunity to really understand how drugs are made, um, they may not be interested in it. But it's one of the most interesting areas in pharmacy, because in pharmacy school you are taught about drug development, manufacturing of drugs, um, production of drugs, but you don't really know how it happens until you see it visually. So that's why, going back to what I mentioned before, uh, in internships, if there can be some type of internship where students spend some time, even if it's a month, in a factory and see what happens, I think that will excite them. All aspects of pharmacies are interesting, but I'm partial to the industrial aspect because that's my expertise. You will be challenged if you like to be challenged. If you like something that is interesting, then because in the factory, you make drugs, you make mistakes. We call it deviations. Those deviations, you must investigate them and have justifications why those deviations or mistakes do not impact the drug. So these are some of the challenges. Every day is different because you come in, you think everything is going to go smoothly, but you have one mistake that you have to investigate. Because if you don't investigate them properly, the regulatory agencies are going to visit you when they do their inspections, and it's going to hurt the company. Okay, so this makes it interesting, challenging. I've met some of my students when I go on industrial visits, and they are very excited and very happy doing what they are doing. And I will be visiting some starting sometime this week, and I see them very happy. So it's really having students experienced firsthand what industry means is really going to motivate them. And then having interesting uh, faculty, lecturers, and supportive that will impact them in a positive manner.
How or where do you see the regulatory affairs in the pharmacy industry moving over the next decade?
Regulatory affairs uh, is let me not confuse you. Let me clarify. Most times, regulatory affairs are concerned with dealing with the regulatory agencies, and there are pharmacists that focus on that. They interact with approval of drugs, interacting with the regulatory agencies, making sure that drugs are approved on time, that regulations are being followed. And there's regulatory compliance, which involves assuring that the pharmaceutical industry is following all the regulations that have been and guidelines that have been developed, including, for example, WHO guidelines if you are in the developing countries, FDA guidelines if you want to sell a drug in the United States, and so forth, CA, and so forth. So um, this area is a very interesting area that needs a lot of um, expertise and knowledge. And it's an interesting area for pharmacists. I know people that are really pharmacists that are focused in this area, including my ex-students. So where it's going in the future is what I mentioned before. There's always going to be regulatory compliance and regulatory affairs. Is to ensure that the organization has a quality culture, which means that when you come to an organization, everybody there knows that we are making drugs. We want to make drugs that are safe for the patient, that are high quality. Um, I know you are aware of all these uh, fake drugs that are in the marketplace or substandard drugs. Substandard drugs may not be fake. It might be that the company doesn't have good quality systems to make good drugs. So their drugs are either super potent or subpotent, or sometimes they forget to add the active ingredient. We have seen everything. That's why you need a strong regulatory compliance program, regulatory affairs program, so that uh, if there are current regulations, the regulatory affairs people are bringing it to the attention of the company. And the company is a learning organization, which means that training is key in these programs, part of the quality system. It's a learning organization. Uh, Things change all the time, just like you have this AI coming up. Companies are learning it. I just finished one project with Pfizer. They're learning all these new programs. You cannot say, "Oh, it just came out today. I don't know about it." No, it's your job to know about it. Some companies, larger ones, have departments that are focused on just monitoring what the government is doing and bringing out, and they're bringing it back to the company. They're developing training programs for it, and people are learning about it and implementing it. And also, companies are benchmarking. Good companies benchmark, which means um, they, I mentioned to you, like when I was the head of the solution uh, committee, what we did there was also to benchmark companies because you have Pfizer, you have J&J, you have all these companies. You ask them, these are not proprietary information. How do you perform the solution on this drug? With regard to the AI, if you belong to the AI group, how do you use AI tools to really do process validation and so forth? These are some benchmarking that you do within all these sub teams that you should belong to. So, with regard to coming back to regulatory compliance and regulatory affairs, where I see it going is where it has always been. You will be monitored, you'll be regulated, and the company has to be up and doing in making sure that it's tracking the guidelines. Like data integrity is very hard now. You have to track it and make sure that people understand data integrity and they are implementing it in their system because you're asking me about trends. It's not a very new trend, but it's very trendy. Data integrity, making sure that whatever information that you are generating from your work in the factory, whether it's in the laboratory, in production, or warehouse, that you are generating true information. You are not falsifying information. You are documenting it in a way that is understood and that is traceable to whoever documents it. If you see Olaruwaju that documented it, it must be traceable to you with your signature, whether electronic or handwritten, and date and time, so that anytime things happen, we can call you to defend it. We know that you did it, no faking. So these are some of the things that are.
Oh, thank you. I think that data integrity is very important, especially now that artificial intelligence is everywhere and
Yeah,
everyone is questioning how are the models generated, what data is being used. I do think that is something that will be very big in the pharmacy regulatory sector in the future.
yeah.
So
And to talk about it, just for information, the data integrity, we didn't talk about it. It's not part of the question, but there are software, computer systems, all the computer systems that are used in the factory, they have to have audit trail, which means what I mentioned before, that whoever tampered, for example, in the laboratory, you use HPLCs and all these, whatever happens during the processing of the data is documented. It's Dr. Chukwumerije that went in here. I have my own password. Everybody has their own individual password. You cannot share password. I went into that system and I changed, I reintegrated the chromatogram and all the parameters you used, the time you did it, why did you do it, and so forth. Okay, so those things are audit trail that are kept, and when they are reviewing the data to approve the drug or to release it to the market, they must review the audit trail along with other data generated before it goes to the marketplace.
So what do you think, for example, for some, the sector in maybe Africa and some parts of the Middle East? So what do you think are some of the biggest challenges to industrial pharmacy in these developing countries? Thank you.
Yeah, the challenges are, uh, in most developing countries, they don't produce their own APIs or raw materials. These are mostly produced in India and China. So that makes drugs very expensive because you have to import them. Uh, in some countries, they have waived the fee or whatever tax they levy for bringing in those things. So that needs to be done, but they don't have theirs. It's not integrated. Countries where they produce their own raw material, companies that produce their own raw material and everything, uh, uh, they do it at a lower cost. Most developing countries don't produce theirs, and that's a challenge. Another challenge is infrastructure, like electricity uh, may not be constant. I can remember going into some factories in some developing countries, and the power will be cut during our audits. That's a challenge. You go to developing countries, all these things are a given, they are constant. So, and then you have a new one for some countries, especially in Africa, which we call brain drain. They have people like you who are very smart, but now you're in the UK, sir. And there are so many, a lot of my ex-students, they call me, they're in Canada, they're in US, they're in the UK, all over. And these are very bright students that we need. And not only students, even workers in factories. I've been to factories in developing countries, and they are losing their best, brain drain. So these are the critical things. There are others, but these three that I mentioned are really critical. The brain drain, um, the raw materials, the infrastructure to manufacture. These are the key, and support from governments. Some governments don't support the manufacturing. The Indian manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing. India is known as the medicine cabinet of the world. They make even drugs for the US now and other countries and the UK. But there was a time they were struggling. They didn't have what they have. There was a time it was like Nigeria. They didn't have all these things. But their government developed a plan to support them. They removed taxes for the equipment and other things happening. They supported the factories, and they really helped them. I've been to India more than 10 times. They have great pharmaceutical companies, API companies, and so forth. So it can be done. It's just these countries have to have the will to do it. It's changing in some countries. For example, Nigeria. I know that the president just signed maybe a month ago a bill that will remove tax on the importation of APIs and raw materials. So that will go a long way too.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think I do agree, and I don't know if intellectual proprietary laws on the manufacturing process of those APIs, if they play any factor also, the limitations with the proprietary rights and the sharing information on how some of them are made.
Well, some of these it might for the newer drugs, and if the companies might have a partnership with foreign manufacturers. Like I know Emzo is developing a API manufacturing plant for artemisinin, and there are other anti-malaria drugs. So you can have this partner. You start with partnership with these companies as alliances. I think that's the way to go, especially for the old drug. For the newer ones, they have patent rights to it, so they're not going to release it. But for the old drugs like the artemisinins and so forth, that can be done. You know.
Thank you very much for that. I think that was very insightful. And I think the government do play a large role in improving the pharmaceutical sector. The last question is more about your own personal journey from your graduating as a pharmacist, the first degree. Can you just walk us through some of like the key highlights of your career journey up to this point and some of the key learnings from your own career journey in the pharmaceutical industrial space?
Okay. Let me first say that I'm not a true pharmacist. I got my bachelor's degree in chemistry from the great University of Ibadan, in Ibadan, Nigeria, or your state. And then I always wanted to be an industrial pharmacist. I always wanted to make medicines. I didn't want to dispense them. I want to make them. That's when I applied to travel overseas to learn how to do that because I knew that's where I would learn it. So I applied to the UK and to the United States. I got admission in both. I got admission in Chelsea College in London to study industrial pharmacy, and also two universities in the US, both in New York. So I don't know why. My brother lived in New York, so I chose New York. I went to St. John's University, where I got my master's and PhD in industrial pharmacy from the great University of St. John's University. And as I mentioned before, I picked up a postdoc at where it's called Orange Trike Foundation, private foundation for the study of science. So I was doing basic science and so forth. I learned a lot from there, and then I went to Hoffman La Roche in Nutley, New Jersey, where I started as a senior scientist. From there, I became a group leader and so forth. And then I was attracted by Johnson and Johnson, also in New Jersey, where I became the site director for 3 sites for that company in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Rhode Island, 3 states. And after that, I was invited by a company which was having a lot of problems, Purdue Pharma, to help them with what we discussed before, FDA problems, compliance issues, and so forth. Um, I was there for a while before I became the vice president of quality for a development company that focused on development of cancer drugs. After that, I transitioned. The WHO invited me to help them with their pre-qualification program in Nigeria. And I went and supported those companies for a few years. And 4 of those companies were certified GMP uh, and so forth. And then I started partnering with various relief agencies like the International Committee of the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, MSF, Medicine Sans Frontiers, and the World Bank and other similar things, companies in doing supplier qualification, which means I go to these companies, I will investigate them like the regulatory agencies do, audit them, make sure they have the systems, the quality systems, the production systems, the personnel, training programs, and so forth, and make sure they have the capacity and capability to produce drugs and supply to these companies. Uh, and In addition to that, I have my own company in the United States where I provide consultancy services to various pharmaceutical companies in various areas. I just finished a program with Pfizer, uh, helping them with various quality management systems and so forth. So that's where my career had led me. But the lesson that I can transmit to younger folks is to be passionate in what you do and to be patient. For example, we're discussing industrial pharmacy here. What I noticed with a lot of students from some countries is, I mentioned it before, they are not patient. Like some countries like Nigeria and others, uh, for the internship, which a pharmacist must do, uh, the hospitals pay more, maybe community pharmacy. industry doesn't pay as much. So most students don't go to industry for that. They don't seek that. But if you want to be an industrial pharmacist, the smart thing to do is to look long term and perform your internship in industry. You learn a lot by doing that. So in my career, I've always looked at the long term in terms of what to do. That was why, as I mentioned before, I participated in all those committees. One, to network, to learn, network, interact with people. Even when you are looking for jobs, you have somebody to say, I'm open, I'm looking for something. And they might even invite you before you ask them and say, there's an opening here, would you like it? So that's why you need to participate in FIP like you're doing. You need to lead in those organizations. You need to volunteer in things, and then people will notice you, and you will do very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chukwumerije, for that. It was quite a lovely interview, and I'm glad that you're able to bring in the different aspects of your experiences. And I think I did learn a lot, and I know a lot of our viewers and members of FIP ECPG will also learn a lot. So thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time. It
Yeah.
was great having you. And to that end, we've come to the end of the interview. So thank you
Okay.
everyone for joining us on this journey.
Thank you.
Do have
Appreciate your
a
time.
lovely time.
Good luck, everybody.